So yeah, thank you for being on time. It's our last class before the exam, which is on Saturday. And yeah, today we're going to talk about what we have to study or what we have to review for the exam. I'm going to be sharing some exercises with you. So you can practice for the exam. You can ask me all your questions. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. Let's start right away. Let me stop sharing this and let me start sharing again the other window that I want to share with you, which is here. Okay, I've got it. So let me go there again. Yeah, so you may be wondering what the exam is about. As I told you last class, it's going to be about the first 3 units that we have covered so far. Of course, we're going to start with verb patterns. What are verb patterns? Gerund, infinitive, base form, and also
Val, your microphone is mute.
thank you for letting me know. Okay, let's start again. I don't know how much you heard of what I was saying because I didn't really notice that the meeting was over. I'm hoping this is just a small problem, and let me check my connection anyway, just in case. Oh, no, we're connected to the wrong place. Okay, yeah. So let's hope that this doesn't happen again because we need to review the contents for the exam. Let me start sharing again. And let's go again. So as I was saying, the contents for the first exam are the first 3 units that we have covered so far. We have verb patterns related to gerund, infinitive, and base form. We'll review those two. And also, we're going to have a look at verbs plus prepositions, which is also important. Then on Unit 2, we were reviewing present tenses. We also talked about question forms and tag questions. And finally, in Unit 3, we were talking about future forms, predictions, plans, offers, arrangements, etc. We talked about last class, and also we covered the present simple and continuous as future forms. So that's done. Yeah, we talked about the environment and eco habits. Yeah, so that's pretty much all what we've been doing. This is the complete panorama. Now we have to see how prepared we are for the exam. I have some slides here where I put together like all the things that we need to cover for the exam. As I told you, we have 3 main topics which are related to the units: verb patterns, present simple and question forms, and future tenses. Those 3 topics are like the big topics that we have covered. Then we were talking about verb patterns. And when we were talking about verb patterns, we started reviewing verbs followed by infinitive, right? So the idea that we shared with this is that we have some verbs like these ones that can be only followed by an infinitive form, right? So for example, in the case of afford, we can only continue that if we are going to use another verb after that with an infinitive form. So I can't afford to go. That's what we call the infinitive, when you have the preposition to and the verb after that. Afford to go, or agreed to pay, appear to support, arrange to meet, be able to work, can't wait to see you, I chose to study and decided to call off. Right? So all of these verbs can only be followed by infinitive. Then we have another list of verbs which are related to the same topic, the infinitive forms. And we have deserve, expect, happen, help, hesitate, hope, learn, and make. Make in the sense of force somebody to do something, or obliged, if you wish. Right? So yeah, also these verbs can only be followed by the infinitive form. And finally, we have manage, offer, plan, pretend, promise, refuse, sing, and teach. Also can only be followed by the infinitive form. By the way, when we talk about this infinitive or gerund, we refer to those times when you have a verb, for example, manage, and you need to write it next to another verb. In that case, when you have two verbs together, like, for example, I manage get. All right, so we have two verbs together. They go side by side. When I need to do this, well, that's when I need to use the infinitive form, right? Because there are times when you are going to use these verbs next to something else that is not a verb. For example, a noun, the name of a person, of course, etc. So in those cases, you don't need to include two in your sentences, right? So yeah, keep that in mind, because these patterns are only useful when you need to put two verbs together. That's what we mean, right? So in the case of offer, it's the same. I need to put two verbs together, offer and give. So in between of those, I need to bring a preposition to in order to make it work. Because two verbs together without conjugation is weird in English, right? So that's why we use a preposition in front, so we can have these two verbs together. And as I said, it is possible that sometimes you are not going to use the infinitive form because you may want to use something else. For example, an invitation, right? So then you have an article and you have a noun. Nothing to do with the infinitive form. Why? Because you're not putting two verbs together, right? So careful with that, because I had some people making mistakes and adding two to everything because they thought, well, if Valeria said that offer goes with two, then everything needs two. That's not true, right? So only when you have another verb together with offer, with manage, with plan, with promise, etc. Right? So careful with that little little piece of information. All right, so yeah, that's the third part of the list. I think that the infinitive list was the longest because it continues in the next slide. We also have tend, threatened, want, would like, right? So all of them go with the infinitive form. You cannot mix them up with something else. And yeah, it is very important that you remember this list. I told you, it's kind of impossible to learn it from memory. And it may not be useful if you're not going to use all of these verbs. There are some people who have very good memories and they just know many things and they remember lists of verbs. And there are some others who tend to forget easier. Right, so yeah, I told you that you need to study this, practice it, and pick up some verbs that are useful for you, like the kind of conversations you have, the kind of contexts where you use this language, etc. Right, so yeah, they are there for you to know about this, because I told you that verb patterns in English, it's key. All right, there are many topics that are divided into infinitive and gerund, from the very basic stuff until this point when we have many verbs that are only followed by infinitive or gerund. So yeah, infinitive and gerund in English, it's a key aspect. It's something that you are going to find in every level, and it's very important. It changes the meaning or it gives meaning to your sentence. So that's why I made emphasis in learning verb patterns. Yeah, so that's what you have with the infinitive form. After we reviewed all of this, I told you about the gerund form, right? So the gerund form is the same as I just explained. The only difference is that here you're going to use a gerund form. What is a gerund form? A verb ending in ing. And so when you add an ing, it's not a verb anymore, but yeah, it's that kind of pattern. So the rule is the same. You are only going to use admit plus ing when you need to put admit plus another verb next to admit. So it would be weird if I say I admit still. It doesn't make sense. It means nothing really. Also, if I say I admit to steal, not really a good idea. I don't recommend it. It sounds weird. So the only way in which you can use admit plus a verb is by changing the verb into an ing form. That's the way it is, and that's the way it works. Of course, you can use these verbs with some other some other particles that are not verbs, that are not gerunds, but that's a different story. As I told you in the previous slide with the infinitives, it's also possible, but here we are only talking about those cases when you need to put two actions together. So one remains a verb and the other one becomes a gerund. That's the idea. So in these ones, we have admit, avoid, be worth, can't help, can't stand, deny, enjoy, and feel like. So all of them are followed by ing form, which is the gerund. So admitted stealing, avoid driving, isn't worth going, can't help laughing, can't stand talking, denied killing, enjoy flying, and feel like going. All of them go only with gerund form. Then we have some others, of course, and they are verbs like finish, give up, keep on, look forward, imagine, involve, mind, and miss. Mind and miss. That's it. And the last part of the list, we have postpone, practice, recommend, regret, risk, spend, stop, and suggest. All of them also are followed by ing form. Again, as I told you with the previous list, it is kind of hard to learn everything from memory. I don't think that's going to work. So what you need to do is to pick up those that are useful for you, or maybe start with it like a challenge, like practicing 3 verbs a week, 3 verbs a day. I don't know how much time you have, but it is a good idea to include them into your vocabulary and to be more aware of how to use them, because as I told you, yeah, verb patterns is key in English. It's a very important aspect of the language. Yeah, so that's the deal with gerunds. And the last thing that we worked on was the base form, which is the shortest list of all. And it is only related to modal verbs and some other verbs. Verbs like can, may, might, must, should, had better, would rather, make, can, and let. So the idea with these ones is that you have to use them always with the base form. What is the base form? The verb without any conjugation, right? So without ing, so without it, you don't need it. Also without to, not necessary. It's just can plus the verb. May plus the verb without conjugation. Can you help me? We may be a little bit. It might rain. I must remember. Should we book a table? You'd better leave. Would you rather stay? Monica makes her 2 teenagers wash. Let me pay. Right? So all of them can be followed by a verb, and the verb cannot be conjugated, and nothing can change in that verb. It stays base form, the most basic of all forms. Right? So yeah, as I told you, this is a shorter list, but it's also very important to remember it because, yeah, as I told you, it's key. You can stop making sense just because of using a wrong infinitive or a wrong gerund or a wrong base form. This is something that we need to keep in mind, like at heart, really. It's as important as that. Yeah, we are going to review some of these rules just to remember them because we were working with them in class quite a long time. So the important thing about the first rule is that all of the phrasal verbs, which we also study, but we are going to evaluate in the first exam, all of the phrasal verbs like keep on, give up, look forward are followed by a gerund form. Right? So whenever you see a phrasal verb, you know that what follows, it's gerund, definitely. That is a rule. Another rule that we studied, it's related to the use of infinitive and base form with some of the verbs. Let's have a read. So use the infinitive, that means without to, after certain verbs and expressions like want, afford, etc. So we studied that. It's not new, we know it. And what is important is here. We use the base form without to after modal verbs and some expressions like might, would, rather, and after verbs like make and let. In the passive, make is followed by the infinitive. Compare, my boss makes us work hard, and at school we were made to wear a uniform, right? So this is just for you to know. It's not something that it's going to add something different to your English. It's just so you know, and if you want to include it, I recommend. But yeah, it's a little tricky. So if you're not truly good at grammar, or if you're not too familiar with grammar rules in general, it may be a little tricky for you to get it. So what we were making is a difference between the active voice and the passive voice. So what we have in the active voice is my mom makes us clean the kitchen. So we have a subject, and this is the active voice. Whereas when you have the passive voice, we are made to clean the kitchen, you focus on the action, and you don't have a subject. Who makes you clean the kitchen? In the second example, we don't know. We know that we are made to clean the kitchen by someone. Who knows who that person is? All right, so this rule is just making the difference for specifically the verb make into the active or the passive voice. That's all we are talking about here. Yeah, so this rule, as I said, it is important if you are planning to use it, right? It's kind of hard to understand it if you're not too familiar with the grammar of the active and the passive voice. But still is something that we studied before, so it's not completely new. Does anybody have any questions about this specifically? Any extra explanations? All right, so let's move on. That's what we have in the third rule. And then I told you, and this is very basic, this is probably something that you studied when you were in English beginner, because it's like the basics. I'm teaching English for the beginners now, and this is a basic rule. This is something that we're doing. So we have that verbs like, love, hate, and prefer are always, well, not always, usually followed by the gerund. It's common, but you can also have times when you can have them followed by the infinitive. I told you that this rule is true, like the general and specific thing, but it's not completely true when you are speaking or when you are using the language, right? So I recommend that you use like, love, hate, and prefer with whatever form you want, because they work with the infinitive and the gerunds. And we, when we are speaking, don't really care about the general and specific thing. It's really something that is too subtle, too little to pay attention to. And usually native speakers have no idea about this. They just speak, they don't know this rule. So I recommend not spending too much time into general and specific thing here. Just use gerund or infinitive depending on what you prefer with these verbs, not with all of them, just with these ones. And the specific thing is at the bottom. And I told you that when like, love, hate, and prefer are used with would, and this is key, they are always followed by the infinitive. Okay, this is the only important rule because it's true and it changes the meaning if you do otherwise. All right, so I would love to, I would like, I would hate, I would prefer. All of those are only followed by infinitive. There's no exception here. It is like that. It is what it is. So don't try and change it because it's going to be weird. When you are using them alone, just like that, then you can actually choose between infinitive and gerund. But when you are using them with would, there is no choice. It's always infinitive after would plus like, love, hate, and prefer. That's not exception, right? So keep it in mind. But I think this is not a mistake that any of you make so far. I haven't heard it, so I think we are good on this one. It's just for you to be reminded of it. And yeah, that's something else that I wanted to remind you. And the other thing, and this is kind of important, is that some verbs can be followed by infinitive or gerund, both, and there is a slight change in meaning, a very little change in meaning, but quite important. We have that case with the verb remember, and with remember, we have that if it's followed by gerund, we are talking about memories from the past. We are remembering something from the past. So I remember going to school very early in winter days. I remember that something happened in my childhood, and now I am remembering. So I remember calling my mom when she traveled. Again, I remember doing that in the past. It happened. On the other hand, if you use remember plus the infinitive form, that changes the meaning a little bit again. So remember plus infinitive means something recent that you did. So did you remember to buy bread? Yeah, of course I did. Or did you remember to do your homework? All right, so I just want to know if you did something in the past or in the recent past that you had to do. So totally different meanings. Memories from the past and having remembered to do something that you had to do. That was your responsibility or your duty, right? So keep them separated. This is also something that you need to learn from memory, but it's going to be hard for you to remember it if you don't use it. So the key here is to practice them. Definitely practice. And we had a similar case with the opposite verb. Here we were talking about remember, and in the other one, we are going to talk about forget. So forget is also kind of similar. When you use forget plus infinitive, you are talking about something that you had to do, but you forgot to do it. You didn't do it. So, for example, I forgot to upload the video of the last class's video. Oops, I forgot. Or I forgot to do the homework. So it's something that I had to do, but I didn't do it because I forgot. That's forget plus infinitive. Whereas when you have forget plus the gerund form, you are talking about something that you did, but you can't forget about. So I won't forget calling you that night. That means that in the past, I called you. And in the present, I can't forget about it. I did it and I regret, probably. Also, she won't forget saying that. So in the past, this person said something, and in the present, she can't forget about it. She keeps thinking about that. Right, so again, two separate and very separate meanings, which are very important to keep in mind in order not to forget. So forget plus to and forget plus ing, totally different meanings. Also keep them in mind because, as I told you, this is kind of important. It's going to add different meanings to your sentences, so it is important to know which meaning we are referring to. What else? We have some other rules, and it is related to the verb try, which is quite similar, but in its own fashion. For example, try plus infinitive, it refers to an effort to complete a task. So, for example, I tried to complete this exercise, but it was so hard. Or I tried to call, but it was impossible. All right, so these two sentences mean that I made an effort to do something, but I couldn't, even though I made an effort. So try plus infinitive is totally related to the idea of making an effort to complete something. Whereas try plus gerund, they are usually related to an experiment, not an effort, but an experiment. Try watching this video. For example, when we made this example, I told you that if you tell me, well, I don't understand these verb patterns, just to help you to see if it works, I could tell you, try watching this video. I'm not so sure if it's going to work, but try watching it. It might help you. I'm not sure. The same could happen with she tried taking some pills, but it didn't help. It was an experiment. The pills probably were not prescribed by a doctor. Maybe she hadn't taken those pills before, so try taking those pills means, well, see if it works, make the effort, but yeah, well, it's not related to effort. See if it works, make the experiment, but we'll never know if it will work. All right, so that's, again, very opposite meanings here. And yeah, so it's just a reminder for you to be aware that it's not the same using infinitive and gerund because it changes the meaning of the sentence. Sometimes, like in these cases, you have the two options, but with complete different meanings. And sometimes you don't have the two options. And when you use one or the other, it makes, sometimes it doesn't make sense or it may sound weird, etc. So yeah, keep it in mind because, again, verb patterns are very important in the English language. And yeah, finally, we had the verb need, which is very versatile. And that's why it is sometimes a little confusing. We have need plus infinitive, need plus gerund, and need plus infinitive again. How does it work? So need plus infinitive with the active voice. For example, I need to clean my car, or I need to paint my house. I need to repair my bike, or I need to charge my phone. What are you saying? Just things that you need to do, like your duties, your obligations, your responsibilities in the active voice. Who is going to do all those things? The person who is speaking, of course. Something a little different happens when you have need plus the gerund. So we have, in that case, the passive voice. So for example, my car needs cleaning, my house needs painting, my bike needs repairing, or my phone needs charging. Totally different ideas from the previous one. I don't mention who is going to do that. It may be me also, I don't know, because for example, my phone needs charging, of course I can do that. I can plug in my phone and that's not a problem. But my house needs painting, maybe I'm going to have somebody else do it for me. So yeah, in the passive voice, you don't mention who is going to do the action. That's a difference from the previous couple of sentences. Then, finally, we have need plus infinitive, again with the passive voice. So for example, my car needs to be cleaned, my house needs to be painted, my bike needs to be repaired, and my phone needs to be charged. All right, so again, what is the difference between these two? There is no difference. In this specific case, they mean the same. So when you are speaking, you can choose one or the other, and you will be saying the same thing, exactly the same. Why on earth do we have two options to say the same thing? We don't know. That's how the English language works, and that's how it is. So the only different one would be this one, need plus infinitive, just because when you are using need plus infinitive, you are mentioning who is going to do the action. Whereas with the passive voice, we don't know who's going to do it, and it's not important. What is important is what needs to be done, really. All right, so yeah, that's another thing that we started with the verb patterns, and it's something that we need to keep in mind again. And I think, yes, we have some extra examples, and I think that's all that we studied. But the last thing was the verbs plus prepositions, because I told you that at the beginning of the course, we studied phrasal verbs. And phrasal verbs are usually verbs plus a preposition, not always, because sometimes you have something else which is not a preposition. But phrasal verbs are not the same as verbs with prepositions. So phrasal verbs can be followed by some other particles, not only plus prepositions. And phrasal verbs have a specific meaning when they are a compound, all right? Whereas verbs plus prepositions do not have a specific meaning. It's just the same verb, but we use it with a specific preposition depending on what we mean, right? So we have prepositions like to, for, from, with, on, and about. All of them are useful, of course, because sometimes we don't know which preposition to use in order to talk about a specific thing. So I recommend using verbs plus preposition. Again, it's a very, very long list. You can see it here. It's kind of impossible to remember all of the verbs. So what's going to help you is practice. The more you use the language, the easier it becomes to remember how things work in that specific language, all right? So what I recommend here is just practicing, including vocabulary, trying to write things. If you have no one to talk to, write something and try to come back to these verbs as often as you can. There is no other way. And also, of course, there are some verbs that can be followed by one preposition, but also they can be followed by other prepositions, right? So it depends on what you mean. For example, we have talk to. We also have talk with. We also have talk about, talk from if you wish. No, we don't have talk on or talk for. Yeah, so yeah, it depends on which preposition. Well, it depends on what you mean, the preposition that you are going to use. For example, if I say talk to, it's a little more serious and formal. So if I say, I need to talk to you after the class, you already know like, oh, this is serious because I said, I need to talk to you. Just the preposition gives me the idea that, oh, this is serious. We need to talk. But if I say, yeah, I was talking to Pamela before the class. I was talking with Pamela, sorry, before the class. Just the use of the preposition with gives you the idea that it was a conversation. I was talking with her before the class. It was okay. So also it sounds a little less serious. It's a conversation. Talk about refers to the topic. We were talking about the exam, right? So the preposition about always refers to the topic of the conversation. And talk from, I'm talking to you from Cochabamba. So it's related to the place. All right, so not because you find one verb in a specific column, it means that that's the only possibility. Of course not. We cannot have all of the verbs that there are in the English language just in one chart, right? So yeah, you also need to keep that in mind. Sometimes you already know because this is a very basic verb, so you may already know about it, but try to focus on those verbs that that you don't normally use, so you can upgrade your vocabulary if you wish. Right, so again, it is important to know that sometimes you can use one verb with many prepositions depending on the meaning of your sentence. That's it. Yeah, so that's also something that I wanted to remind you about this. How is this going to be included in the exam? It's a good question. You may be wondering because it's a lot of information. It's too much. You have too many verb patterns, many prepositions, many specific rules. So it is going to be a little tricky. So just for this part, the verb pattern, we are going to have some exercises related to vocabulary. So what does this word mean? Like trying to guess the meaning, also related to phrasal verbs, of course. And we are going to have these matching exercises where you have to put things together in order to complete sentences, stuff like that, because yeah, it's a lot of information. It's too much. And I don't want you to get overwhelmed with it, trying to study or trying to review all of them. And of course, you are not going to learn all of the verb patterns from today until Saturday. So don't even try, because it's going to be a pain in your heart to try to learn all of this. It's impossible. If you haven't been studying periodically since we started with these verb patterns, it's not going to work from today until Saturday. So yeah, I don't recommend trying that because yeah, it's not going to be successful. I told you that learning a language and learning specific patterns, it's a process. It takes time, it takes patience, it takes motivation. So yeah, now what you can do is to try to remember, try to study the ones that you already know and be aware of those. Because the rest is work that we need to do in progress. Does anybody have any specific questions about this, about their parents, how it's going to work on the exam? Tell me any comments that you have. New comments? Good, all right. I thought I was going to have many comments about it. Yeah, what we are going to do is go to, well, where is it? Yeah, I'm going to share a board and a board with mirrors. Sorry, my connection is really unstable today. I don't know what's happening. All right, so what we are going to do is to go to a mirror board that I'm going to share right now. And what we are going to be doing is to be completing a few exercises about this. This is not going to be a long thing. It's going to be just a 5-minute thing because I told you there's no much we can do about verb patterns. All right, so I'm going to share this board, and I want you to choose one board according to your specific room that you're going to be on Zoom. You have to choose the board here. So how is this going to work? I'm going to give you 5 minutes to write on the first slide that we have there. And what you have to write, at least 4 questions related to verb patterns, things that you are wondering about verb patterns. Okay, even if it's something really basic, like what are they useful for? Like, why should I know verb patterns, right? So whatever you want to know, any questions that you're not asking in class because maybe you're too shy to ask it, you ask it on Miro, on the first board that we have there, and then we'll come back. Of course, I'm going to be reading those and trying to give feedback before the exam, right? So any question that you may have. Let me share the board, and then I'm going to have you work in pairs on the small rooms. Only 5 minutes, though, so don't take too long thinking about your questions. Don't tell me that you have no questions and there is nothing that you can write, and at least you have to write 3. But if you have more than 3, it's perfect. Right, so now let's go to the breakout rooms, because yeah, that's something that we're missing. So let me create them. And yeah, let's go. I'll see you in 5 minutes, no more than that. Let's go. Yeah, again, as always, let me know if you have problems going to the small rooms. Okay, it was a little difficult to make you come back. Don't worry, because we just came back for a few minutes and now we're going to go back to the small rooms again. I'm just going to explain what's going to happen now. Let me go to the slides. And yeah, so now it's sharing. So yeah, in these slides, I have put together all the contents that we are going to use for the exam. So the trickiest part, the most difficult part, if you wish, it's verb patterns. That's why I took the first part of the class to explain just verb patterns, because it's a lot of information, as I told you. But then we have something that is not so difficult because you already know, and that is present tenses. All right, so I have put together all the present tenses. We have here the present simple and the examples. Present continuous, which is extremely easy. Present perfect simple and present perfect continuous. Also, what we studied here is embedded questions and subject-object questions and question tags. Yeah, so that's the whole of the second unit, present tenses and question forms. Then in the third unit, it was even easier than the previous ones, because here we were just talking about the future tenses and the present continuous, the present simple, and be going to refer to the future. So I think these things, since we have already studied them in previous courses, they should not be very difficult for you. So what we are going to do to practice this is to complete exercises about them. And again, we're going to work in pairs. So what I'm going to do first is share the link with you, the link of this presentation, So if you need to go to any information, you can visit the slides and be checking the information. What else are we going to do? We are going to go back to Miro. And what we are going to do is to complete some exercises that I'm going to paste there. I was keeping my exercise somewhere else so you couldn't see it on Miro already. So what's going to happen is that I'm going to paste the exercise there, and you are going to be able to complete it in pairs. Of course, team 1 is going to complete their exercise on team 1, right? And I'm going to be pasting them in all of the Miro boards in a second, okay? And along the class, I'm going to be checking your answers so you will know whether you're doing a good job or no. And on the next 2 blank spaces that we have there, I'm going to be pasting more exercises about tag questions and future forms. So you can practice the contents right away on your Miro boards, and you can discuss the rules. Of course, I'm going to be visiting the small rooms, so you can always ask me if you have any question, or if you need some extra explanation, just call me to your room and I'm going to be there, right? So what's going to happen now is that we are going to go back to the small rooms, but this time you have to choose your room, because it would be a very good idea to go to the same room that you were previously. All right, so let me recreate them, and you have to choose your rooms. Let me know if you have any trouble going to the small rooms and I can help you. Marcelo, tell me.
Val, in which part of your presentation we can find the task?
It's not on my presentation. The tasks is on Miro, so you have to go there. The presentation is just for you to try to find out the answers when you don't know where the answer is.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, see, if you have no more questions, let's go to the small rooms. Remember that you have to choose your room. If you don't know how to choose your room, let me know and I can help. Okay, I don't see people going to the small rooms. What's going on? We're all here. Okay, so I took some extra minutes of your time for you to be able to work with more exercises. I wanted to complete those exercises because it's going to be very similar to what we're going to do on the exam. So if you want to keep working on that Miro board tomorrow or on Saturday to practice, it's not a problem. I'm going to share the link with you on LMS and also on YouTube when you watch the video class, so you can keep working on those. As always, the exam is going to be available on Saturday from 8 in the morning until midnight. Please complete it before midnight so you have enough time to do it. It's going to be our first time on LMS, so I'm hoping everything works fine. If you have any trouble that day, just write to me. I'm going to be paying close attention to the messages you can send me that day. We are not meeting on Zoom, so it's not necessary for you to come. And last thing, also I'm going to share the slides on LMS, so they are going to be there for you to review the information that you need. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much for staying a little longer today, and I'll be seeing you next class. If you have extra questions, just stay with me. Yeah, the mirror is going to be shared on LMS too. And I can share it on WhatsApp if you want, Maria Elena, no problem. Right.